Welcome to the Lawyer Life Podcast, where we seek to navigate our days with a little less stress and ideally a lot more fulfillment. In this season 3, we focus on small and big changes that will advance our well-being, personal and professional lives. On today's episode, we discuss ego. Ego. We're asking ourselves whether a belief in our own importance could be our greatest weakness. I'm Mike Anderson.
And I'm Darlene Tonelli.
Well timed with the song again. Hello, Darlene.
Nice. Hello. Happy Friday.
Very happy Friday to you. How are things so far this morning?
Things are great. Just brushing up on a little stoic philosophy here.
Of course, as we all do.
As you do on Friday morning in preparation for your lawyerly podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I, on the other hand, spent some time this morning raking leaves.
Nice. So, I need to do that.
Small difference.
I find that relaxing in a strange way.
I like it until you have to put the leaves into something.
I know. That's the worst part. For sure. Someone needs to make a better system for that. That could be your gripe.
I have thoughts. But I'm sure that people I'll start my own leaf gathering podcast and really get into it, you know.
Right.
I'm sure the people listening today don't really care about how I feel we can dispose of leaves better.
That would be a real hit, the leaf gathering podcast.
Welcome to the Leaf Gathering Podcast, where we seek to navigate our leaves with a little less stress. And ideally.
Could be a niche audience.
I think so.
Even more niche than the lawyer audience. But anyway.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. And we should say, we recorded a live episode last week of the podcast. Mm-hmm. How about that?
That was big.
At Osgoode Hall Law School, which was a lovely place. When we were hosted, there was pizza, as there should be when you're back at a law school, I think.
Overall, it was really fun, and we achieved our goal of doing a live episode.
That's right.
Inside the year, so that was great.
I do believe that was my goal, Darlene, and my ego is going to say that I was successful.
Oh, you're so right. That was your goal.
Yeah,
so good.
We're talking about ego today. And mainly we're talking about ego because of a book that you read and put on to me to read called Ego is the Enemy by Ryan Holiday. Great book.
Yes, it is a great book. He wrote a bunch of books, so it's a part of a series. It's Ego is the Enemy is this book that we read. He's also written Obstacle is the Way, Stillness is the Key, and The Daily Stoic. So he's got a bunch of books. In addition, he has other books in a different vein, but he's a prolific guy with interesting thoughts.
His background, he's still like he's a young whippersnapper still, but basically his whole bit is he caught success pretty early, like led marketing at American Apparel, had a great mentor. But then things started to fall down around him, right? And he came to the conclusion that a lot of, the foundational reasons why, people he admired and other things in his life were falling down, mainly was ego.
Yeah. And I think why I thought it would be relevant to talk about on the podcast as part of our high performance season is I think he presents this really great take on the issue. We're so bombarded in our media with these stories of these hard driving, ego driven people. And he uses the example in the book of Steve Jobs, one of my favorites, as we talk about on this podcast.
Yeah, we're always a little perplexed by your admiration of Steve Jobs.
But interestingly, he says that these ego-driven people, he says Steve Jobs specifically, and he also says Kanye West, but he says these ego-driven people actually accomplished their best things in moments where the ego was down. I was like, oh, that explains it a little bit, because I too don't support, the more like narcissistic, angry behaviors that are well publicized. It's more for me the other stuff that I think is great about Steve Jobs. Anyway, the thing that I thought was so great is that he really spells out, look, we hear that this is a great thing. We are constantly pointed to role models that are, we think are successful because of their ego. And then he provides this counterpoint of showing a whole bunch of people who are successful because they put their ego aside, which you don't hear as much in our popular culture today.
Yeah. By nature of not stroking the ego, you often become a person in the background. He defines ego as an unhealthy belief in our own importance. And one of the things in the intro that I really loved, I think he's quoting another individual, and it basically saying the ability to evaluate your own ability is your most important skill. Mm-hmm. And effectively that ego allows you, distracts you from actually understanding what your own abilities are. And that can have negative effects. He says that ego has cost people that he admires millions of dollars and rolled them back from goals just as they achieved them. So it's especially in our profession, which I think that, certainly promotes this idea of separateness of, being high achieving individuals that aren't necessarily like all the other folks can lead. I think it can lead lawyers to building an ego that can cause problems at times, certainly, and can distract from fulfillment, from success that individuals actually want to achieve. The outcomes that they want to get to. And can cause failures that don't have to occur.
Well, and why I thought too, this made me really reflect on, a topic we've kind of circled back to a fair bit just due to the belief in the importance of it for lawyers. The thing about law school in particular is you go in as a success. That's how you've had a bunch of successes on the sort of the things that society says are important, like grades and things like that. You start law school from that premise. And then, so by definition, like all people who go to higher education are starting from this perspective of, I'm a success, look what I'm doing. And there's a really great quote in here that I think is worth reading. Page 14, he says, with success comes the temptation to tell oneself a story, to round off the edges, to cut out your lucky breaks and add a certain mythology to it all. It's a type of storytelling in which eventually your talent becomes your identity and your accomplishments become your worth. I loved that because I think that's in part what kind of locks lawyers in to this idea that, oh, well, because I've been successful, I have to do all these things. I have to stay on this path that I'm on, or it would be a waste, or whatever the personal narrative is. But that's why it's so important to just question that and say, well, is it is my success at age 22 determinative and defining, and does it point me down a certain path?
Yeah.
That's what I thought was the lawyerly hook that brings us to talk about this book as part of our high performance season.
And the author basically breaks the book down into 3 different parts. One is about being humble in your aspirations. One is about being gracious in your success. And the third is about being resilient in your failures. And the humble in your in aspirations bit, I really, really enjoyed. And there's a great story about a gentleman named John Boyd who was in the U.S. military. He was a fighter jet pilot, worked at the Pentagon. Not somebody that books normally write about, but he had a philosophy and spoke a lot about to his mentees about you have a choice to make, and that choice is to be or to do. And basically, what he was getting at there is that you can have a goal and just decide to do the stuff that superficially looks like you're meeting that goal. So you have a title, you're making money, and all that, has the outward trappings of, oh, look at that person. They're so great. That's to be. To do is actually to decide that you're going to do the work necessary to achieve your goals, your personal aims, and not be looking outwardly and take on those outward indicators of success, but actually just follow your path. In that way, when you are the to-do person, you're more likely to be self-satisfied, to not have to compromise. You avoid other people's pressures. And in the end, you're far more likely to leave. I really enjoyed that part. And I think it aligns with a lot of what we've talked about in this podcast. Were there other pieces from that section about being humble in your aspirations that caught your eye?
I mean, it spoke to me. It definitely spoke to me. So much of this book spoke to me because I think it just was like reading a really, well-researched, backed up sort of history / narrative of something that I just find to be such an interesting topic. The humble and the aspirations thing. Yeah. I mean, I think for me, I'm always sort of saying, okay, like, what do I need to do as opposed to what is, what you might be pressured to do. And I think for everyone, again, that always looks different. And I do think that you can be in a big title and a role and do, if it's the right thing for you, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I don't think the two are mutually exclusive. I think the error is thinking one leads to the other. So if you're in a big fancy title and you are just kind of biding your time and not actually using it to do the thing you know you're supposed to do, then it's a problem, right? So he doesn't really say that specifically, I don't think.
Yeah, that was distilled, I think, as well with a quote that comes later in the book from Angela Merkel. It's that you can't solve tasks with charisma. Mm-hmm. And I think that, the to be side is that ego stroking side where it's less substance and more sizzle, right? Or more steak, or more sizzle and less steak, right, as they talk about later in the book. And the to-do people are actually the folks who have done the hard work without seeking necessarily all the acclaim, and they're the ones that solve problems. And one of the things in that section as well that I thought was interesting, and I want to get your thoughts on, because it speaks to, I think, early careers in law, is the canvas strategy that he promotes. And basically the author is saying that when you start out especially, but you can do this at any point in your career, you can decide to help other people in the background, allow them to take credit, do the good work, and whoever, gets the accolades, it doesn't matter, especially if you're helping your superiors, right? So, and what he's getting at there is, let's take early days in law, for example. If you've done great research and you've come to a great conclusion and you hand it up to your senior partner, if you subscribe to the canvas strategy, you don't care who gets the credit after that. You just know that you've done the work. And if you continue to be valuable in the background, that will pay dividends in the long run. You will become indispensable. You will become the expert in that area and so on. Instead of being the person who at every turn wants to be the front-facing individual that gets the credit. Because in that example, in his view, that leads you to kind of have a target on your back at times, and perhaps also stretches you into places where you're not necessarily prepared or as well read or as able to do the good work that you've done in the background under the canvas strategy. So this, I think in some ways, and he confronts this a little bit, but this does promote the, put your head down, be a good soldier sort of, don't self-promote, don't cause a fuss sort of narrative that I think a lot of people early in their career, young lawyers get, and people later in their careers as well in certain places. And I think there's negatives to that. I happen to be a canvas strategy person, I think, and I did like it and I subscribe to it, but I could see how other people wouldn't like it. So where do you come down on that?
Well, I certainly am the type of person that would just jump in and do the work for sure. I'm glad that he put that in here because I think there's some, from my perspective, some poor advice out there right now, which is kind of, make sure you're always focused on where your career is headed so that you're getting the brass ring and you're getting the credit and stuff like that. And I think that comes off, I mean, I don't know, maybe that works sometimes. It wouldn't work for me. Like, to me, it's all about, let's pitch in, let's see how we accomplish our joint goals. And I want to help people, and I want people to have like their own take on what is important to them. But it gets very tired very quickly if someone's like, well, how does that help me? Like, how is that good for me? And what you're asking me, how's that good for me? That's really annoying. So I see a lot of kind of advice being given to people who are just starting out in their career that, make sure that if there's office housework happening, make sure you're not doing most of it. For women and for people who are not, as we've discussed in past episodes, like historically privileged in the workplace or are slightly outside what the workplace usually demands, some of these things might seem like, not a path to success. That hasn't been my experience. And I think it really, attitude, when I was a kid, my dad was always telling me, it's your attitude, not your aptitude, that determines your altitude.
Oh my gosh. I didn't see the altitude part coming. That's next level.
Oh, if I had a loonie for every time just to be Canadian, that I have heard that statement. But it is true. Like, attitude can go so far. And the thing about the good attitude is, like, you don't know what plans people have for you. I mean, I was always very lucky to have great bosses that, saw that and did good things with it. And I think if you are having a good attitude, you really can never lose. You might get to the point where it's not getting you where you deeply feel you need to go and you have to make a change. But I don't think it's a losing strategy. Is that what you thought I would say?
Yeah, I'm not surprised by your answer. I think that you highlight a thing that I was kind of teasing at before too. I think it's easier for me to be like, yeah, the Canvas strategy is good because of the position I'm in. Whereas if I was a racialized person or a minority in the workplace, a woman, these things I think are a bit, it's a bit more complicated to always be the one that's producing the most and giving your ideas away without seeing something come back. The be a team player sort of message from management can be used strategically to keep people in certain positions. And I think that's more likely to come if you are not a white male. So I think the Canvas strategy bit is very good. Don't try to feed your ego. Just do the good work. Be generous with your work. Try to help out other people, especially, your bosses do their jobs well. I think that's all really important. Do the work no one else wants to do, all that. But as you're saying, there is a threshold where you have to come to understand, am I giving too much, and is it causing a problem for my life? And I think that's different than bringing your ego into it. I think that's a separate calculation.
And also people have to do what they're great at. So if someone, I personally, I would rather be doing the work that maybe isn't as high profile within a company, but is helping people or is solving a problem that is going to, in the long term, save people a lot of hours. Or, I really thrive on that. If I didn't thrive on it, maybe my advice would be different. But I also, I think sometimes the big ego deals or the big reward, big recognition deals, they're also very stressful, So some of these things where you're going for certain results in the workplace, it really is just always a constant barometer of like, is that something is that right for me? Or is it just what I'm told is important? And I think ego will always tell you that the promotion is important or being at the front is important. But not always, I think it's a really complicated topic. And I do think that there is a risk of being kind of the person who's always doing the low value work. That's a little different. If you're constantly doing low value work, it can mean that you're, people think that's all you can do. And that isn't great. So, I mean, I think in the example I'm talking about, it's been a mix, it's been the willingness to do the less prestigious work and the work that has higher value, if that makes sense. So I don't know that there's a one size fits all, but I think some of the business advice I'm seeing is like it assumes it's one size fits all. And frankly, it devalues some of the work that I think if you're good at, it is valuable to a company. Like, I don't think a company can subsist with only the high value work. It just can't. There's a lot that goes into a company or a firm or any organization being successful. And I'm just kind of nervous about any advice that's like, oh, if you're doing the low value work or it bugs me when it's called office housework, although just because it's a similar devaluing of work around the house.
You're right. Yeah.
In the office. So I don't love to buy into that because I'm like, no, it's valuable. valuable work, you may not get promoted because of
Yeah.
it, but hasn't been my experience.
That's the work that keeps everything afloat, right? That's the interesting thing. And it takes humble people to do that work because it is expectation work, right? It's just the work that's necessary for everything else to go on. So it doesn't come with a claim because it's maintenance, right? But talking about success, I really like the one section called "Beware of the Disease of Me." And this is very Darlene of me. It made me think of the word disease differently.
Mm-hmm.
Dis-ease. Yeah. Very Darlene analysis. But anyway, it gives the example. So the basketball coach, Pat Riley, and talking about like the ascent of winning teams. And he said basically there's an innocent climb where we're all in this together and we're, hardworking people. And then you win. If you're lucky. And then what comes in his view is the disease of me, where because you won, you now have an ego. This disease of me is the beginning to think that we're better, that we're special, that our problems and experiences are so incredibly different from everybody else's that no one could possibly understand. And so with success, if we allow the ego to be fed, comes this separateness and this specialness that we give to ourselves, which obviously has substantial drawbacks.
Oh man, so much good advice. So many little gems in here, right? Like from whatever context you're interested in. There's sports, there's military, there's political, there's there's the philosophers from ancient Greece. Like he goes deep with this stuff. And I think that's what's so interesting is that it's long in the 100s, not the 2000s. People knew these things, and we still haven't fully twigged to them as a society. It's okay to be the least important person in a room. I'm fine with it. It's fine. I think it's where I kind of really take instruction from this book is do the thing for the reasons that you're doing it. Don't do it because you want recognition. Don't do it because you need to be in the right room or with the right person or with the right client. Just do it because it's the right thing to do every day, a little bit at a time. That's what I take from this.
Yeah. And he does focus on like, you need to know what's important to you. And that's how we started this season. Mm-hmm. And that will make sure that you're chasing the right stuff and that you're accomplishing the most that you are able to accomplish where you choose to be accomplishing things and not getting distracted by, the bright, shiny thing that comes with the traditional view of success.
Well, and didn't you find that you feel better about that as an option? Like it's one thing for us to talk about that and say that, but when you read the book and it talks about like military generals that we've always heard of, or maybe you haven't heard of, but you know about the achievement that happened. And it talks about how their approach was successful. And to me, it's just the stories. Sometimes the stories are so important because we just don't hear them. You don't hear the stories of people call it the unsung hero for a reason. Like you're doing it for the thing, not for the acclaim.
Yeah.
And you may never get acclaim for the things that you do. And that doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it, I guess.
So much of those stories are about like self-regulation and discipline, right? And that's not great fodder for storytelling. You want like the brash, passionate leader that goes out on a limb and makes a decision that happened to work out and isn't that interesting. But like in the book, one thing that comes to mind on this subject is the story about DeLorean, the car company. This guy worked at GM and hated all the rigor and thought it was killing creativity and goes out and makes his own car company. And it's a disaster because he didn't manage himself or the company. Like there was not management. There wasn't discipline. There wasn't regulation. It was, I think one of the quotes in the book was that it was management by, what was it? Like hitting brightly colored balloons. Like it was just like whatever came their way. They were just like this now, this now, this now, this now. And I think one of the major bits about this book is being a person that is fulfilled requires a lot of discipline, of knowing who you are, what's important to you, and staying on that track, not getting distracted, and not allowing other sort of incentives to get in your way.
To that point, why? Like, why practice discipline? And this is sort of, I think, gets into the failure part of the book, where he deals with why do failures happen for people with big egos, partially from lack of discipline. You know, why are you practicing to be disciplined? Why are you trying to get mastery over your emotions? Why are you trying to focus on, making, it's the things we talk about on this podcast, like making sure your mental game is at the best that it can be, because you do not know when you're going to be forced into a decision that is way outside your comfort zone, and you're going to need it. And he talks about like Napoleon, who we all hear about as this great general, and the way that he sort of frames him going into his last battle is just like this colossal failure of ego and like overconfidence in his abilities and stuff like that. And I think that's a big example of something that we could all fall victim to, really, in anything, just making the wrong calculation and getting too full of ourselves. So I think that was helpful to me, just to be like a clear encapsulation of why discipline matters. Like, people, when you hear the term stoic, which his book is largely based on stoic philosophy, you think they're doing it just to like have a hard life. Well, it's kind of my personal take on what stoicism was about. But they're not doing that. They're doing it because they believe that it is sort of easier to get to virtue through hard work than to just kind of be, distracted, as you were saying earlier, by kind of the fruits of all of these pursuits, like the sort of material side, or the status or the title or whatever. So that to me was really useful for a sort of endpoint of like, okay, help lawyers deal with success, help them understand, help anyone really. I mean, this is an extremely broadly applicable book. But, understand that if you've been successful, it's the result of a whole bunch of things. Some of them may have nothing to do with you, like this is the privilege discussion. Some of them may have a ton to do with you, but it doesn't necessarily mean you have to keep doing those things forevermore. Maybe you just look at it as, okay, this is what I did, and now I'd like to do this. I've got the framework. I'm going to go do this other thing. Or I love this. I'm going to keep doing exactly what's made me successful. I'm going to keep plugging away, and that can work. But then the failure side is just about, okay, if I fail, so if I get fired, if I, lose out on something I was hoping to get, it's the same thing. It's like, don't get too excited about the success and don't get too fussed about the failure. And that's the big arc that I think is so relevant and helpful. It's kind of a summary of sorts.
Yeah, there's just like general kind of control element here of just, if you do stay on your path, the successes and the failures won't really take you too far off of it, because it's about the path and the work and not the outcomes. And the more I think about it, I mean, it's mentioned in this book a little bit. It feels like so much of life really comes down to that marshmallow test, that, that famous study with the kids. This book, I think, is like similar. Like, the kid, they study these kids, they put a marshmallow in front of them, and they're like, you can eat this marshmallow right now.
Yeah.
Right. Here's a great reward sitting in front of you. The ego is like, what sort of sucker wouldn't just eat this marshmallow right now? It's sitting there, right? Or, certain amount of time passes, you just sit, don't eat the marshmallow, and then you'll get 2 marshmallows. And so if you can just hang on and not let your ego be like, take it now, you need this, blah, 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 blah. This is what you need. This is like, this is going to be great. It's going to taste so good. It's going to feel so good. And if you just sit and think, well, I didn't even know that there was a marshmallow in this room until this person put it in front of me. Now all of a sudden it's so important to me. Like, what is that about?
Oh my gosh.
But, I'll just chill. I'll be myself. And if someone wants to give me 2 marshmallows down the road for just, continuing to do what I was doing before, great. I'm just going to continue to be me. and not be distracted by this, tasty treat object. And so I'm just going to live my marshmallow life now, Darlene. I'm just going to be a marshmallow person. Don't care about the marshmallow is the message, really. It's not about the marshmallow. It's about you. And what you actually want to do.
It's about the discipline to ignore the marshmallow.
Yeah. And also, really, if you didn't know what a marshmallow tasted like and someone put it in front of you, would you even think it was tasty?
That's right.
It's a weird food.
Focus on how you don't usually eat marshmallows.
Look out, the big marshmallow lobby is going to come after us.
Who likes marshmallows anyway?
Don't eat it. Don't care about marshmallows. All right. I'm glad that we got there. That's really where I wanted to get to on this ego episode today. We're going to go for a break, and we will be back after that with our goods and grapes.
The Lawyer Life podcast is brought to you by Inter Alia Law. Inter Alia lawyers have big firm training, in-house experience, and a wide range of expertise in technology, media, and entertainment. Our advice is business-focused, speedy, and practical. To learn more, visit interalialaw.com. That's interalialaw.com.
And we are back with our goods and grapes. Goods are things we want to promote and support, and grapes are things that annoy us. Darlene.
Okay, so my good,
Yeah.
recommended by our friend of the pod, Catherine Chang. She twigged me to this podcast called The Anxious Achiever, which I really am enjoying. I've listened to a couple of episodes. But more than just the existence of the podcast is just the idea of people speaking about anxiety publicly and talking about it as a real thing. I mean, I think it's the modern state of a lot of people. There's a lot to be anxious about, but I think it's what's refreshing about the podcast is that throughout she will talk about topics and then say, because of my anxiety, this is how I deal with these things, sort of thing, which I just always welcome any move towards speaking openly about challenges. So that's my good. Do you want to do your good, and then we can gripe together? Because I have a legit gripe today.
Okay, cool. I like it. My gripe, or my good. Sorry, my good is that we met our goal collectively of having a live podcast recording, which was really fun, and I'd like to do more.
It was really fun.
That was good.
Yes, that is a good. Meeting goals is good. I'm not sure if I have, I think my goal was to post on social media 3 times a week. I think I've done it over both Inter Alia and the Lawyer Life pod, but I'd have to go back and re-listen. I think the goal originally was 3 times about the Lawyer Life pod, and I'm not sure that we have achieved that.
Yeah. I mean,
perhaps I should go back and spend the last month doing it 3 times a week.
I feel like, oh goodness. Speaking of, actually, let me say this. Speaking of doing things that are important to you and fulfill you, Darlene, I don't know if it's important that you meet that goal.
I would agree. I think I go through these times where I aspire to be better at social media. And then, the fact is, being on social media takes something, as well as, it has a purpose, obviously. But it is really time consuming and draws you into these ecosystems that you have to. It's pretty hard to post on social media without being on social media. And anyway, my thoughts on that.
And we just talked about this. I just deactivated my Twitter account. Deactivated. It's gone. No more. I'm off. It's done.
Wow.
Yeah.
Deleted.
Yeah. Gone. There's no more account. It's over.
How long has this been the case?
An hour and a half.
Okay, so perhaps too early to get a temperature check on how this is changing your world, but it would be good to hear about that next week. I would love to hear about it.
Okay, cool. I will
next
follow
week.
up. Yeah.
Okay.
I have a short gripe, and you can then gripe away after that. My gripe is bad pens.
Oh, man. You could resolve that one fairly easily at Staples.
Yeah, I don't know. Why make them? I don't want. And then you wind up. Someone hands you a pen. It's a bad pen. just want my pens to work and be. I like the ones that are kind of smooth and flowy.
Right. Okay. That was a classic Mike Anderson gripe.
Yeah.
I have a almost Mike Anderson level gripe. I spent, because I use like traditional iPhone, like the white headphones to plug into my mic for this podcast, I spent a good 9 minutes detangling the headphone wire before this call.
Yeah.
And then some listening would say, get AirPods. Well, I have AirPods too. And I spend a lot of time on the phone in a typical day. And around, 3 o'clock every day from fully charged AirPods, I am getting the like boop, 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 boop while I'm on my conference calls and trying to do the big switch of the headphones. It's almost driving me to be a landline person. I might get a landline just because of the headphone issue.
How does that change?
Well, then you can like hold the phone.
But
like I might get a proper, like a rotary dial. I'm going to get a rotary dial phone and use that for my calls.
But you can just hold your cell phone.
It gets so hot. I don't like holding the cell phone on my ear. Don't you find this? Like some of our calls are like an hour.
It gets all oily from your face.
Oh, well, I don't know. That might be just...
That's just
that
me?
would be its own gripe. But it just is so... It's not good. There's no... Anyway.
I'm going to send you a thing. I know what I'm going to get you for Christmas.
An untangleable headphone?
No.
What?
No.
Okay.
I feel like I want to tell the audience. Can you take your headphones off for a second? And just not listen to me?
Okay, I'm not going to listen.
Okay, audience, I'm going to get Darlene this weird thing I saw online, which is, it's like a thing you plug in to your cell phone, but it's actually like the way a normal phone's top is that you would like actually hold to your ear. So then she gets the benefits of having that thing without the drawback of the landline. Okay. Okay, Darlene, you can come back.
Okay, I could hear you because I think you were yelling. That's funny.
Well, just at the end there.
Well, I look forward to whatever that was.
Don't listen to the goods and gripes of this episode because
okay.
I tell you what I'm going to get you. I'll get you other stuff. It won't just be that.
Oh my God. You don't have to get a Christmas present. This is not a requirement. However, I guess that's it for our episode. That was my longest gripe, maybe. I feel
not at all. It was anywhere. No, the other you've had more.
It was my longest Mike style gripe.
Right, that's right. Yeah.
Anyway,
the superficial gripe. Okay, well, great chat. Thank you for this. We will talk soon.
Talk soon.
That's it for this week's episode of LLP. Thanks to Inter Alia Law for presenting the podcast and to Nick Fowler for composing and performing our music. See our show notes for his website. Don't forget, we love feedback. Please comment in the review section or subscribe or like. We'd appreciate it greatly. That's it. Talk soon.